1 year has passed since Mossmouth released their long-awaited faux retro anthology UFO 50, a title that has received countless accolades, taking a spot in many a Game of the Year list, and for me, the subject of an obsession that, over 100 hours in, I feel like I've barely scratched the surface of. As part of an ongoing series on Substack, I have been chronicling my time with each of the 50 games in the collection, my early thoughts on experiences as I have played them, how my relationship with and understanding of the work has evolved over time, and the challenge of coming to a compendium of games that are a clear homage to an era that I'm really not all that familiar with. It has, as I suspected, been a brilliant way to engage with the core text. I posited in my video on the subject last year that taking an extra bit of time with each game, regardless of my specific enjoyment of it, would allow me to get a more fuller picture of what the developers intended with that experience. While not every game in the collection had within it a moment that made me fall in love, Nimpek, I'm really sorry, it's not you, it's me, I did find more often than not that the extra time spent gave me a warmer impression of that given experience than I probably would have at a cursory glance. On occasion, I even had encounters where my thoughts went from repulsion to adoration in less time than it would take to watch an episode of Supernatural. I'm watching Supernatural at the moment. It's good, it's not good, but it's watchable. What I found within UFO 50 is a philosophy of game design built around an unusual bit of friction. These are retro games, in aesthetic, in tone, in constraint, but not necessarily in design. Without the required context of what these individual games are modelled off, it's easy to overlook the distinction between old school motifs and modern sensibilities. When you take stock of the entire history of games, it really does feel like one stretched out conversation about what does and doesn't work in those ludic spaces. To the victors, the spoils; for everyone else, a quiet fading from history. There are, however, key differences. The canon that the collection is built around is that these are titles for an old abandoned home games console, found unceremoniously in a storage locker, titles made throughout the 1980s by a company that would eventually be named UFO Soft. A lot of effort has gone into maintaining this kayfabe, not just in terms of the design of the games themselves, but also the narrative that envelops the project as a whole. One of the more quietly understated elements of UFO 50 is that it is a chronicle about the journey of a game development studio from early solo passion projects to more substantial commercial releases. It's a story told subtly through contextual clues, shown in how the games grow in complexity and visual fidelity as the years go by, in the showcasing of a gnawing tension among the various developers responsible for bringing these creations into existence. The order of appearance during credits rolls tells us something. Some cheeky messages painted covertly in corners where unassuming producers were unlikely to look. There also exists some even more obfuscated elements that I only know about thanks to the diligent attentions of other like-minded fanatics approaching the collection with that same analytical zeal. It's not just a celebration of the evolution of games over time, but also a stark warning of the still very relevant perils of the interests of capital seeping into artistic endeavour. The story of UFO 50 is a story about the game industry, ripe with design conflicts, small acts of defiance, and office politics spread out plain to see for anyone who knows what to look for. All of this is a narrative that is pushed to the limits of immersion by a litany of choices, ones that stem directly from the fact that these games were made not only far more recently than that proposed era, but that they also exist in the wake of nearly 40 years of game design evolution. There's only so much you can divorce yourself from, even with strict adherence to now voluntary constraints. There still lies that which manifests as an unconscious adherence to extant paradigms that simply did not exist back then. What I mean by this is that many of the games of UFO 50 feature systems, technology, and ideas that are, at the very least, extremely unlikely to have existed in the years that they purportedly were made. Even something as simple as the proc-gen stylings of certain titles would not be possible with the options available at the time. There are very modern-feeling titles within this framework also, games that feel very much in conversation with the post-2010 indie scene, in a certain sense still a homage to retro experience, experiences, just not the ones you're expecting. Yes, this is a fictional history, and within fiction any and all things are possible, but beyond anything else, these are games that have been designed to be played today, for an audience steeped in those contemporary ideas of what a game should feel like. More importantly, with that rose-tinted sheen that has come to define the idea of a retro experience, even if it contradicts the reality of what those old-school games actually feel like to play. It's the game design equivalent of iPhone face, but it's not a black mark against the project, rather something that I think makes it all the more interesting to engage with. Modern mechanics, concessions to the kindness of the present, and a relaxing of dogmatic principles, inarguably in favour of a fun gaming experience over an authentic one. It is an interesting foil to the general tone and atmosphere of UFO 50 as a complete holistic project. Some titles feel perfectly at home within the self-imposed constraints of the work. The 2-button limit demands some creative workarounds that result in many a moment giving that wow factor. An idea that you didn't think would manifest, a complexity hidden behind your own unconscious biases. Then there's the restricted colour palette and pixel counts slowly expanding as the proposed years of development go by. Gorgeous presentation through and through, really making the most of those chromatic integers. There's also a spot of manufactured creakiness in the mix with some very convincing audio quirks. Composer Eric Serka did a brilliant job with not only the tunes, but how they are implemented to give the sensation of a piece of hardware straining to maintain its original purpose, not only in the sense that it's being pushed beyond its original limits, but that it has also weathered decades of inactivity that have had a tangible impact on the quality of the sound. It works because it's not so in your face about this approximation of the years that never were. It feels right. And that's the consequence of all these particular design decisions. They result in games that just feel right. A fun experience over an authentic one, but still enough creative flair to hide the seams, and the unconscious desire to modernize those things that once irked the developers about the games they themselves played in the past. A lot of what I've talked about so far in this video is vague and hard to visualize without having a similar familiarity with UFO 50. So as a palate cleanser, let me talk more specifically about 3 games in the collection that I strongly feel best elucidate the underlying principles of the project as a whole. A wildly esoteric start for anyone dipping a toe into this collection, Barbuta is a brutal, confusing, sluggish and seemingly kind of unfair experience that I immediately recognised as something brilliant, but that I also completely understood why so many had bounced off of it. Taking place across a series of rooms, each with their fair share of platforms, traps, hazards and enemies, what initially seems like an exercise in frustration slowly unravels into a much more clever game, wherein exploration is but a fraction of what's really going on. As it turns out, the whole dungeon is one big puzzle for you to work out. There is a sequence to how you navigate this castle, how you get around its traps, with items to collect to aid in navigating obstacles and hidden walls obfuscating all manner of secrets. There's a heavy touch of Dark Souls to the proceedings, if you can believe it. Familiarity being nurtured through failure as much as it is through success. Checkpoints are plentiful, but lives are not. You will have to start from scratch more than once. This is a steep hill for many players to get over, even though it is explicitly by design. At once a game about pattern recognition as well as puzzle solving, with a touch of randomized chaos thrown into the mix with the appearance of one invincible enemy prowling the halls, this game's placement at the head of the collection is a fascinating choice, one that teaches the player 2 things. 1. Retro style also means retro difficulty. The fact that moving immediately right on the opening screen flattens you under falling masonry is not only very funny, but also instructive of the kind of trial and error thinking you will need to adopt to make any headway in this game. 2. It's okay to shut this off and go explore the wider collection if you want. The journey to understanding what Barbuta wants from you is a slow and steady one, and I would be hard pressed to say that the fun factor was readily present, but this is also why I think this has to be at the head of the queue. You might want to come back to this later, you might benefit from hindsight. With that second point in mind, still I found myself quickly obsessed with this game, so engrossed in the mystery of making sense of how these individual rooms connect and relate to one another, that I ended up building my own scrappy map in the process. While I have yet to beat this, I was surprised at how much time I sank into it before moving on to anything else. More importantly, it shocked me how quickly I got over that hump of not making any tangible progress at first. That usually knocks the conversation outside my sphere of interest immediately, but here it felt like an enigma I was destined to solve, and I kind of did, a little bit. It's a work in progress still. Part of Barbuta's appeal to me is that it offers up a mix of challenges. Navigation puzzles and combat encounters are front and center, but there are also unusual room layouts that invite questions about the wider mystery of the castle, spaces that seemingly have nothing in them yet feel precise in design, locations it seems impossible to reach, offering up their own peculiar joy when you inevitably gain that eureka moment. What I see in Barbuta, in its savage difficulty and stark presentation, its methodical pace and esoteric puzzle design, is the evocation of an era of games thought long gone, but secretly still there. In that same breath, it's also clear that this is very much a modern title too. You can tell that it was made by the people behind Spelunky. You can tell it was created as a conversation between the past, the present, and the future. You can tell it was made by creators who understand implicitly that the canvas allows no things to ever truly vanish. This is what is meant by great art having a timeless quality to it. One more go. A turn of phrase I have an extremely haphazard relationship with. I usually hate having to repeat sections of a game, especially when on multiple occasions I've been so close to that next checkpoint. But with this bafflingly odd platformer, I have to make an exception because Mooncat is so incredible in execution of an idea, it's hard not to want to keep playing, even through the struggle. At first glance, this seems like a bit of a troll, a Bennett Foddy-esque rumination on spatial coherence, perseverance, and the inherent slapstick of not really having a handle on how to navigate a game world without the comforts of a more conventional mechanical paradigm. It's hard to really put into words what's initially so rebarbative about the control scheme here. You have two clusters of buttons, one moves you right, the other left, and then all other actions have to be input with a combination of both. While there is logic here, at first it seems completely at odds with your understanding of how a platformer character should handle. The intangibility of this control scheme, its precision and yet seeming impreciseness, is going to be very off-putting for a lot of folk. Certainly when I first encountered it, I was worried. As the world's most dyspraxic man, I struggle with button inputs at the best of times. It's part of the reason why I never really got into fighting games. My fears, however, were unfounded, because with very little time I got so used to the control scheme that it became intuitive to the point that I almost wondered why no one else is using it. There's an interesting setup that surrounds Mooncat's core quirk. Supporting this journey of growth, every new room is a new checkpoint, so you're never too far from progress, nor set back that much in failure. There are also no lives to worry about. You can keep chipping away at each challenge however long you can stomach the taste of defeat. This, again, feels like a modern concession, albeit one that I think is essential to the flow of the experience because, quite importantly, everything resets when you close the game, so you kind of have to keep playing. That last point can obviously be mitigated by keeping the game in sleep mode instead of shutting it down, but I feel like that's against the spirit of the thing, and I would argue that you directly benefit from having to start from scratch if you want to put it down for the evening anyway. Not only is it a means of showcasing mastery, clearing screens in single runs where they previously gave you so much grief, but also this is a game with multiple paths. Hidden warps to new areas are tucked sight unseen throughout, requiring feats of dexterity in order to gain access to. It's a brilliant brilliant reward for those fastidious players who bring more of themselves to the experience of play, not only a treat for the sickos, but also a tasty respite for anyone who's currently bashing their head against a particular set of hurdles. Much of Mooncat's golden path is linear. You need to get past certain obstacles to progress, and some of those challenges can seem rage-inducingly impossible to overcome at first. These alternate excursions somehow fit perfectly into that sequence, discoverable to anyone with a keen eye, but hidden away enough that they don't distract from this critical track. As it turns out, also essential for meeting that coveted cherry condition, as the golden path becomes a golden web of sorts, and the sequence with which you tackle Mooncat's challenges matters a lot. Mario, with a balked control scheme, it turns out is an ingenious idea, one made all the better for just how well it understands that its level design, the enemy placement, and your mastery of abilities need to work in harmony. Because the most fascinating thing about Mooncat for me personally is that it's a game that's all about momentum. The key to unlocking mastery over its frictional, wonky controls and biting difficulty is to understand that you just need to keep moving. Everything exists like clockwork, and eventually you get a feel for which obstacles need to be considered and which can be ignored. Some enemies will scoot over you, barely missing by a fraction of a pixel. Others will murk you in an instant. Some even exist as platforms to allow you to get to higher elevations. The push-pull of this design is built around a sense of flow that at times genuinely makes you feel like you're playing an auto-scroller, or like a really weird version of Mirror's Edge. I think this is one of the most uniquely brilliant things I've played in this collection. I also think this might be one of the best platformers ever made. Overbold is about as perfect an execution of a concept as one can get. A one-screen arena shooter where you think you control the level of challenge, but do you really? There's a brilliant dichotomy to be found here that once again drills into the constraint of the whole project: complexity through context. Overbold's core consists of just two actions: firing a gun and dropping bombs at your feet. Despite the generous array of upgrades available between rounds, these two things do not change throughout any iteration of the game, and yet every run feels exciting and new. The context of how and when you use these tools a crucial key to survival. There are many things about Overbold that immediately won me over. The enemy design is top-notch, both in terms of artistry and behaviour. Mossmouth have created a rogues gallery of instantly grokkable beasties that, at the drop of a pin, allow you to know what you need to do to avoid instant death and best them in combat. Clever placement of bombs and bullets in each of these encounters is key to victory, knowing when to risk getting up close and personal and when to stay the hell away. The more you play, the better you understand where your skills lie, and thus what wrath you can eventually bring upon yourself. You get to pick the level of challenge in each round, gambling on your own life by increasing the danger and hoping you still come out the other side clean and flush with cash. The thing that is truly brilliant about Overbold, however, is that it very cleverly does not let on how essential your own willingness to hoist yourself upon your own petard is to actually winning. Throughout the game, each round you face off against a collection of foes, and by your own hand you can increase that stock to increase your payout. Cash is used on a range of upgrades, ones that offer one-time protection against projectiles or a boost to your damage dealing capabilities, or even increasing your pool of health so that you can stomach that occasional poor choice in the moment. Embiggening your purchasing power before the next round thus increases your odds of survival. It's almost poker-like in its execution. You only know what else gets added to the roster once you've committed to opening the gates to it, but sometimes the gamble is worth it if it allows you to afford that extra hit, or a more lethal set of bombs, or the ability to walk over lava. Crucially, this is all at your discretion. The choice of upgrades, the choice of how many foes you feel like you can take in one sitting. Overbold is a game about empowering the player to be a vessel of their own destiny. For the final round, you do not get that choice. You have to fight everything. It's a one-stop shop of pain that hits you like a sack of bricks the first time you encounter it. Everyone and their mother out for your blood, and a gargantuan, juicy final boss to boot. Almost immediately after I encountered this final round for the first time, I got what the game was demanding of me. A perfectly encapsulated piece of design that forces you to contend with every aspect of the game, from the combat to the upgrades to the gambling. That this final round is at max ante whether you like it or not creates this kind of incredible vicious cycle for the player, a dilemma at the heart of the storm. To win big, you need to survive. To survive, you need upgrades. To get upgrades, you need money. To get money, you need to win big. Were I far from sensible, I could easily see myself extending my diary series for another year or even two. There's so much about UFO 50 that I have not engaged with yet. Its multiplayer component for one, something that no doubt would fundamentally change my relationship with a lot of these games. Maybe for the better, maybe for the worse. Who knows, that's the fun of it, right? Then there's the push towards meeting the cherry conditions for most games, that extra layer of challenge that often drives you to think about a new way of approaching the mechanical design of the work. Hell, I still actually need to finish most games. On top of all this, there's also the terminal functions, a hidden sublayer of modes and alterations unlocked by discovering codes through the process of play and mastery of the games in this compendium. I suspect there are still things that have largely gone unnoticed by even the most rabid of fans. UFO 50 feels like a once-in-a-generation project, the right kind of ambition, the perfect collaboration between creative minds that has resulted in something that I genuinely believe I will be chipping away at for years. Thank you for watching. With this video and the conclusion of my diary series, I think I can safely say I've done justice to my own critical appraisal of this game. But I am just one man, and much of my thoughts come down to taste and personal experience. What do you think? Let me know in the comments your overall picture of UFO 50, what your favourite games in the collection are, or even what you would do differently if you were the one making this gargantuan creative work. Until next time, I'll see you soon.